what can we do as humans? And we're really good at creativity. And at present, the AI is getting better, and AGI is probably around the corner. And granted, it will reason, it will rationalize, it will be our digital twin, co-creation, partners, co-pilots, all that goodness is coming. But I think the essence of creativity and human creativity is still within the human.
Right.
And the question will be, where does that take place? Can it take place both in the physical workplace? Yes. Can it take place in a home office with distributed technologies? Probably yes. Can it take place in innovation, creative centers that are third locations? Probably yes. And so the question will be, how does the intensity and the frequency of all of that get orchestrated so that you have a seamless, wonderful day-to-day experience?
Welcome to The Future of Less Work, the podcast where we're piecing together the transformation of work one question at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen, and today we're diving into one of the biggest shifts the workplace has been bringing us in the last few years, and that's hybrid ecosystem. The way we work is no longer defined by a single location. Instead, work happens across offices, homes, co-working spaces, virtual environments. But at the end of the day, we're social beings. We want to meet, right? So what does that mean for how organizations should be thinking about workplaces? My guest today is Peter Miscovich, the Executive Managing Director and Global Future of Work Leader at JLL, a global real estate services firm. He's also co-author of The Workplace You Need Now, which provides a framework for shaping adaptive, human-centric, and technology-enabled workplaces. Welcome to The Future of Less Work, Peter.
Wonderful to be with you today.
Thank you for joining me. I always start with this question. If the future of work is a puzzle, what's the piece you're working on?
I would say the piece that I'm most focused on is how to integrate technology, behavior, and place in the most constructive manner for global organizations who are very complex. So I know that's a lengthy answer, Nirit, but it's sort of my day-to-day problem solving, and I've been doing this for over 25 years. So it's what I do day to day.
And wow, I was going to say we're probably giving you more and more to solve every day, because technology and humans in the workplace, that's kind of like the moment, isn't it?
It truly is. And, if we look back historically over the last 25 years, with the birth of the internet, the birth of mobile technologies, the iPhone in 2007, iPad in 2010, this progression of technology has accelerated these new work practices and work behaviors. And then we had the pandemic. And the pandemic was a tremendous accelerant that pushed us all 5 to 10 years into the future with, remote work at scale. And so now in the post-pandemic world, the complexity of the puzzle continues. And many organizations today that we're, counseling and assisting are looking to create the most viable solutions. And the refreshment cycles have also accelerated in the post-pandemic world.
Yeah, you took me back to 2007. So I actually started my very first future work project in 2008. And we were looking at this unbundling of the workplace. So, obviously the iPhone, the apps, then the cloud, the wireless, all those cables that connected the desk to the wall, they were disappearing. And you started realizing that work was no longer a place you went to, it was something you did. And I remember putting in front of a bunch of leaders this slide that said, everywhere is going to be the new location. And we're back in 2010. And I got one of those answers I like in writing: no way, we'll never allow that to happen, right? Because we were describing a work ecosystem where people would come together potentially in offices that didn't belong to their employer, right? And work alongside other people. So,
right.
That's the fun of the future. It kind of shows up at some point.
Well, I agree. In that period of 2005, 7, 10, 12 was a really transformational period with the cloud, with mobile technologies, social networks were being, born, if you will. and then flex work, co-working, and the experiential workplace. We worked with many Fortune 100 tech firms during that time. And we saw the birth of flexible working and the experiential workplace really develop at scale. And so it was a tremendous time of innovation. And, that time today is being accelerated now with AI, with augmented reality, immersive spatial computing, soon to be quantum. So we're seeing this continuation of technology being the driver. And then as human beings, we need to adapt. And therein lies the fun of what you and I do every day.
Yeah, I mean, you took me all the way to quantum, and I really want to go there because I actually saved some questions, but let's just backtrack for a second. So we had kind of the decade before COVID, and then COVID pushed everyone over the edge, right? Even the ones that thought it was impossible. And your book came out in 2021, which is kind of right in the middle of that rapid transformation of how work environments evolved. What have we learned since? Because everybody's, you've got like all these sides, right? People are saying back to return to office. And then there's hybrid and there's what have we learned?
What we've learned and what we're experiencing, I summarize in 2 words: complexity and paradox. And everything is complex because as human beings, we want socialization and we want togetherness. And that's still very important. And the hybrid workplace offerings certainly provide that. But then with technology, we're being pushed further and further, Nirit, into the digital AI, purely digital collaborative space. And so the tension between human togetherness, accelerated digital technology advancements, and what I'll call the continuation of new ways of working that began in 2007, all of that is creating both complexity and this paradoxical challenge where togetherness is important, hybrid is important, leadership wants one thing, individuals want another thing, middle managers are caught in between. And so there's a lot of tension in the system right now in terms of how organizations can navigate workplace behaviors that will be most effective. And I'll just share with you, we believe that AI and the future will allow for yourself or myself or colleagues to have personalized workplace efficacy.
What does that mean?
That your personalized work journey, day to day, hour to hour, will be managed on your behalf, either with your digital twins, with agentic AI. And so right now, the ecosystem is very turbulent because these technologies are still, emerging, if you will. But if you can imagine a world 2 or 3 years from now, where between our digital twin capabilities, agentic AI capabilities, our work days and work hours and work minutes will be orchestrated on our behalf.
So essentially, we did kind of speed up, right? I mean, we're stuck in this conversation of home versus office. And you are, and I totally agree with you, rightfully saying, just, get your head kind of up from the day to day for a second and look into the way technology will enable us to communicate, collaborate, co-create, and feel like we're in the same space as opposed to that kind of, little boxes of video that we're talking through these days. And when that happens, location will be even less important, or what? Or tailored, or what will it be?
I would say location will be important as long as it's digitally enhanced and it provides what I would call a peak experience for the worker. And it has intentionality. And so I would say the physical location peak experiences need to be fully enabled. And today they are not, very immature. I would say this experience that you and I are having right now, as we record this podcast together, is primitive. We're still in the Stone Age. We really are.
And I mean, if we go back to pre-COVID, right, this was like a lot of people didn't even recognize this kind of experience. And here we are, right?
Yeah, and it existed.
You're right. It's primitive.
I was doing Cisco WebEx in 2009.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually, that's where I was going to ask you, because you talk about offices with peak technology experiences. And I'm kind of reminded, right, of, I mean, I remember the big teleconferencing rooms that looked like everybody was around a table and you had all those screens. And then today we don't use them anymore because driving into the office to sit in a video screen room, right, versus just opening my screen. And so if I have technology tomorrow that allows me more immersive, multi-sensory collaboration, do you really think that would, I guess my question is, what is the role of the physical kind of coming together of at the office, or
I
is there
think
one?
I think there will be a role, but it will be part of this progression. And to your earlier good point, I mean, spatial computing and immersive computing, and we've had some big scaled programs with big tech firms on this particular platform topic. It's still not quite there yet. And even with the Apple Vision Pro, Nirit, amazing tech that was released by Apple. But we've got to get to a place where these augmented AR, VR, immersive spatial technologies are really, they're replacements for our iPhones and our smartphones. And that will be coming to us probably by 2030, 2035 at the latest, maybe before. I've been off
So
on timing. I
sometime in
think,
the next decade, right?
yeah,
We'll have
exactly.
like computer headsets.
Exactly. And then the combinatorial convergence of those headsets with AI, with our digital twins, I think will begin to allow for this sort of seamless orchestration of our work experience between the digital and the physical. And I do think physical place will have a role, but it needs to be further enhanced. And the digital virtual environment that we're in right now, it needs to be further enhanced. So it'll be interesting to see how these enhancements converge, potentially diverge in some cases. But I think we've seen post-pandemic, across generational divides, there's real interest for connection. In California right now, speed in-person dating is at an all-time high because people got sick of trying to date one another via apps.
Yeah, yeah, which
Right?
goes back to my point, right? We're social beings, right? And so there's got to be um, a role to the person to person conversation and connection in the workplace, right? We just haven't quite figured out where it is. And I actually remember in your book, you talk about, I think you called them the 4 C's, right? You talk about
Right.
culture, collaboration, creativity, community. And that resonated. I recently on this podcast had a conversation with Anish Raman from LinkedIn's economic opportunity officer, and we talked about kind of AI and will it replace us, right? Or is it shifting our role to actually put the human capabilities and skills at the center of what we do and what makes us
Right.
different, right?
Right. Oh, I would agree with that statement very strongly. And, this question around what can we do as humans? And we're really good at creativity. And at present, the AI is getting better and AGI is probably around the corner. And granted, it will reason, it will rationalize, it will be our digital twin co-creation, partners, co-pilots, all that goodness is coming. But I think the essence of creativity and human creativity is still within the human.
Right.
And the question will be, where does that take place? Can it take place both in the physical workplace? Yes. Can it take place in a home office with distributed technologies? Probably yes. Can it take place in innovation, creative centers that are third locations? Probably yes. And so the question will be, how does the intensity and the frequency of all of that get orchestrated so that you have a seamless, wonderful day-to-day experience?
So how do you see workplaces facilitate culture or community or even co-creation and creativity in an environment that I think we're in total agreement, right? Technology will facilitate better and better non co-located interactions, right?
Right.
Which by design means that this ecosystem of people being all over the place and working together will get better. So how should we be thinking about facilitating culture?
Culture is a tricky word, and it's
Oh
an
yeah.
important word. And I think there are two drivers to culture. One is the driver of human connection and meaning. And so I want to have a meaningful relationship with colleagues. And how do I create that meaningful connectivity and cultural environment? And that can be both in the physical space as well as certainly in the digital space. And then the other main driver here with culture is leadership. And how do leaders behave? And, Narit, I work with a number of CEOs and executive leadership teams, and it's interesting for me to observe as a longtime observer of leadership behaviors that how leaders behave really matters and what they communicate matters. And so as we look at culture, if we think about leadership, if we think about meaning and inclusion, belonging, people want a sense of purpose to their day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
That includes, purpose in a relationship, a purpose to be in a company, a purpose in the work you do, a purpose in the social networks that you belong to or social communities that you belong to. So I think it's a very interesting time. And I think what's also challenging, Nirit, is that we're all overwhelmed. I've done quite a bit of work on personal resilience. And I think part of the challenge is there's so much coming at us in terms of information and disruptive change. And I would say there's a lot of, negative, if you will, energy that we all have to absorb and navigate and manage. And so the ability to maintain equilibrium, to maintain our capabilities and performance levels and positive attitudes, positivity, it's very challenging today.
It used to be this idea that you shed your kind of home or private persona when you walked into the office building in the morning. You became kind of that professional persona, and then you kind of you could step back into your private persona when you walked out of the office building. And today all you have to do is get out of bed, cross the kitchen and sit down at a desk, and you need to switch personas, right? And I think that it's becoming really tricky to actually leave the stuff we used to leave outside the door, or and basically it's getting kind of everything's getting mixed together. And people say they want authenticity, and in their relationships, also at work, not just in their private lives. I, I look at the leaders, and in this podcast we've been talking about a lot of leaders that are actually trying to figure out how to do this, right? And I still look at the leaders who are saying the only way we know how to do this is to bring people back into the buildings, right? Um, what would you have them hear?
I think it's really unique to each leader and each organization and each culture. And one of my big mantras is that leaders need to have a learning mindset. I mean, Narit, I have a learning mindset.
We all do.
We must though. And
Yeah.
this goes, look at Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, right? One of his major pillars and values in terms of his leadership styles to have this learning mindset. And so the ability to continuously learn as leaders and learn with our teams and evolve these workplace practices and behaviors, I think is the only way forward. And so if we think about mandates, if we think any mandate, anything that is too fixed today, I don't think is sustainable, Narit. Anything.
So basically, if companies are looking at their real estate policies and their hybrid policies, and you consult them kind of looking at this, in the next decade, basically, we're agreeing that all this technology is going to come in and make it more ubiquitous to work wherever you are. What would you have them do?
First of all, take on the learning mindset, and then to design evergreen, workplace ecosystems that will allow for this integration of advancing technology and new work behaviors. And it's not easy. I mean, this requires, because, the physical place, certainly in real estate, is very fixed. And one reason that we're very busy as JLL and JLL Advisory, we have 120,000 folks around the world. We're a $23 billion company. And part of our growth is that we have to help so many clients now navigate the complexity that we're describing. And so the complexity crosses geographies, it crosses demographics. I have singular clients, Nirit, that have multiple strategies co-creating in parallel, with some of which are very different outcomes because the businesses and the geographies and the demographic workforce profiles are all different. And so it used to be, I'll date myself here, 20 years ago, it was very much not a one size fits all, but you had cubicles and offices and 5 days a week. And it was like a militaristic, regimen. It was, and we all did it.
Yeah, it was a standard, and we know we're asking them to personalize. I think what I'm still struggling with, and I'm going to push back a little bit, is trying to understand if technology steps in as because I have my HR hat on, right? And people are saying, I am not willing to get into a car or a plane and travel to get into a building and then put my headset on. And sit in front, do something that I could have done somewhere else. So it feels to me like there's using technology to work and as much as possible without needing to worry about where you are, and then worry about where you are when you're actually trying to interact with people, because we're social beings, right?
Correct. And that balance, what you just described, that is the missing balance today that all organizations are struggling to achieve, and managers and teams. And back to your HR, managers today are so burnt out, and a lot of leaders are burnt out because to try to create this balance is so challenging. And
well, because we're worrying about number of days in the office. We're not worrying about
outcomes.
Yeah, or even, what should you be doing in the days you're in the office versus what you should be doing in the days when you're not. It's not just like, run your calendar the same way you've always had and just change the location. That doesn't work.
And I'll add, look at, for instance, Microsoft Places, which is a place-based orchestration platform. We're working with Microsoft. That's an example where this orchestration of your weeks and my days and our meetings, and where do we need to be in the digital virtual realm? Where do we need to be in the physical realm? And how do we start optimizing that? So it really has value, because I fully agree with you. For people to drive 2 hours, 1 hour, commute on a train, to go into an office and then to be on Microsoft Teams or Zoom or Google Meets calls all day, it doesn't make any sense. And this is where we're seeing quite a bit of the pushback and the tension between some of the return to office mandates and the workforce needs. And that harmonization may take some time. In doing this work many years ago, it was called alternative, the alternative workplace. Giving people flexibility was seen as being very radical and very alternative. But I think it's taken, 30 years, 20 years in a pandemic that employees desire flexibility, and place matters, performance matters, leadership matters, and outcomes do matter. And business outcomes very much so do matter. But how do we try to triangulate? How do we harmonize all of that in a way where, we try to look at these outcomes that are win-win-wins? It's a win for leadership, it's a win for the organization, and it's a win for the employee. And I think, Nirit, I don't think we're quite there yet.
Oh, no, I'm sure we're not. I was going to ask you, what do you think needs to happen, or what should we be doing? So if a leader's listening to us, right, and thinking about this, because I say, leaders they're smart people and they know how to read the system. It's not that they don't get all of this, right? So I strongly believe that the reason that they're trying to go back to the future, which is not a possible direction, right, is because they really do not know how to drive the organization, right? In this different environment. I mean, they're used to sitting in the conference room, the PowerPoints come in, the presentations come in, the people come in, that the conversations happen in the corridor. That's how they're used to navigating the organization, and they don't know how to navigate the virtual organization.
I would agree. And I think in the next 10 years, the next generation of leadership who assumes, power, if you will, and authority within organizations. And we have many, many startup examples that have been fully remote and virtual startups. We also have startups, Nirit, that are very successful in-person startups. And so there's no necessarily right or wrong answer, but what are the most effective answers? And this is where I try to meet clients where they are, and then take them on this learning journey to develop some new innovative answers and solutions that will work. And sometimes, you create pilots or you co-create, new programs. They don't always work the way you assume they should work. And you
Do you
learn
have
from,
an example? Could you share an example of
oh,
a pilot like that?
yeah. I mean, we had a pilot where a client wanted 2 weeks a month in the office, 2 weeks remote, hybrid virtual. And for some of the employees, that 2 week, um, you know, structured hybrid approach worked all right, but it didn't work for everyone. And there were those who actually wanted 4 weeks or, 4 days a week for 4 weeks a month in the office. And there are those who wanted 4 days a month, in the office. And there should be a way to accommodate. And so this is the challenge. Who do we accommodate most in these programs? And how do we enable the right intensity and frequency of engagement in the physical office space and in these virtual distributed networks? And in my sense, and in my history and your history, I've seen, and I was part of early we did social network analysis at MIT in 2001, 2002. Early days, we could see that distributed networks were coming. So distributed networks are definitely here. They need to be further enabled. And there are nodal work modalities within networks that require physical presence. And it's still being shown that has value. But
Yeah, I think nobody argues that, but you were also saying something even more powerful. You're talking about, I call this flexibility within a framework, right? So I think a lot of organizations have described their hybrid policies as, like you said, either number of days in the office or something like that, right? But it's instead of basically saying, let's really understand what's important in terms of where we meet. I think Microsoft called it moments that matter, right? So where we meet, and then that answer might be different for different teams. It might be different over life cycles of work, right? And then basically, what do you need to coordinate and with whom to make that happen? And so one group will say it's a 4 days like this, 4 days like that. Another group will say it's 4 weeks and 4 weeks, but it doesn't matter as long as you've coordinated the system.
correct. And this is the challenge. That coordination orchestration is part of the current, challenge. But I think we'll get there. My sense is, 20 years ago, I mean, we didn't have all of these technologies. Today, we have a lot of these technologies, but we're dealing with a lot of spaghetti, right? In terms of the technologies, they're not fully orchestrating all together as of yet. I do think AI will play a big role in that, into enablement of behavior, place, process, data. I mean, we're still sort of in this clunky, we've got to do so much on our own, whereas technology will start adapting more to our behaviors than our behaviors adapting to technology. And this is one of the premises we have at the Accenture Technology Vision Board over the last 10 years, that we'll see adaptation of technology to human behavior versus human behavioral adaptation to technology.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I keep saying that every time I see somebody saying that prompt engineers is a profession. It's like, no, prompt engineers is an interim solution for us speaking machine language instead of machines speaking our language, right?
Exactly. And that's already changing, Nareet, what you
Oh
just said
yeah.
in the last 3-4 weeks with
Yep,
deep research.
absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely. So so you did kind of talk about how you see this evolving, but as we wrap up, I'm wondering, what's your vision? If we got it right, right? What's your vision for the not just the technology part, but actually the combination of the technology and the human kind of moments and the and meetings and office and organization? take us, 5-6 years down the road?
I mean, a vision for, say, 2030, 2035 would be orchestration of work practices that will enable the highest levels of individual human performance, group and team performance, distributed human performance, and that will meet leadership and business objectives, goals, strategies. Ideally, that to me, if we were to paint a very idealized future state, Nirit, that idealized future state would take out all of the current tension and noise and conflicts that we're seeing on this very important topic.
Yeah, yeah, that's going to be. I mean, it's a bit of a challenge learning to get there. So, I always ask at the end of our conversations. We always talk about answers, right? But I actually want to ask you, what's the question you think we should all be asking ourselves about the future of work?
The question that I ask myself every day is what value am I bringing to the world? And I know that sounds like a big question, but I think, am I creating meaning? Am I adding value? And then if I find myself getting answers to that question that I'm not comfortable with, it means I have to shift, and I've got to take some of my own advice, right? And shift my thinking.
I love that. I really love that. I think we should kind of ask our listeners to stop for a second and jot down, and if you wish, maybe even in the comments here, what's the value that you're bringing, or are you clear, and what would it take for you to figure that out? Because I know that that's not an easy answer. Wow. Thank you, Peter, for joining me today on The Future of Less Work. For more about Peter Miscovich and his work, check out the links in the podcast description. You can also look up his book, The Workplace You Need Now. Thank you for joining us on The Future of Less Work, where we're piecing together the ever-changing puzzle of work, one conversation at a time. And remember, the social contract that we're in is a win-win between people and organizations. Your best people do not work because they have to. They don't work because you tell them to, or you measure them on it. They work because they want to. Because by working for you, they're also achieving their own purpose in life. Till next time.